this is what happens in the culture wars, that when someone considers you an enemy at this time, they consider you an existential threat.
Shout out to M169 for the $10 super chat. Says, would love to know when phobic evolved into hatred instead of something as opposed to fear of something. Great.
Yeah, it's in the critical social justice literature, and it's another example of linguistic creep. So they don't need to make special words. They don't need neologisms. They change the meanings of ordinary words, and then they enforce linguistic creep. They use these things. Bigotry is the worst of all. Discrimination is another one, although they've shied from that in the last few years. It used to be earlier on. Discrimination just comes from the Latin discriminare, to choose between or to root out. So, transphobic, you're transphobic. You have an irrational fear of people. And the key idea of a phobia embedded within the Greek phobos is the idea of fear of. And so that there's something that you have like a spider, that it's an irrational fear, and one need not have a fear of that. But again, this whole thing is so frustrating because it's just so moronic, all of it. It's just so stupid. The West, we're losing fundamental institutions, and a significant minority of the citizenry has become deranged because of an imbecilic idea by a bunch of fringe lunatics that started in France and metastasized throughout the system. And now look, it's throwing us, people are dying. It's defunded the police. Children are being mutilated. The whole thing is it's a mass delusion.
Absolutely. Well, I would say that, certainly bringing it back to the SSE, that your street epistemology it's such a perfect, how did you, it seems very simplistic, but how did you come up with this?
I came up with the street epistemology in my first book, and I did that with my work in prisoners. It's a very long story, but let me see if I can condense it. So I've always loved the Platonic dialogues. I've always loved Socrates. He's been one of my personal heroes. I've been fascinated by the way he asks questions. In the Meno is a great example of that, when he brings the slave boy over to talk about math and math being in him. And the Republic is probably my favorite book. Plato was the author, and Socrates was a character in the books. Mm-hmm. And there's some contention about whether Socrates was a real figure or not, but it doesn't matter. So I just started in the prisons. I was originally going to title my course Introducing Socrates, but the name had been taken. I pulled questions from the history of Western intellectual thought, and I applied a Socratic method plus other things drawn from the literature. I then spread that out, and I started looking at what was the best available data from wide variety of sources: hostage negotiations, cult exiting, drug and alcohol counseling, applied epistemology. And then I used those questions. I had been teaching in the university system as an adjunct I taught in a truly crazy number of people. I'm not even going to say, because no one will believe me and it will undermine my credibility if I said how many people I taught, but I would use a fundamental way of questioning as being like a Socratic method plus. And one of the things that I realized from doing that in crowded university classrooms was that people's confidence for things didn't match the evidence that they had. And that could be unmasked in a few questions. Right. It was pretty simple to do that, but it's not just the Socratic method. You have to add a wide variety of techniques, rapport building and how to ask questions and stuff from improv comedy. And
you're amazing at, kind of drawing that, because clearly you have strong opinions and you've thought this stuff out more than most people. But when you watch, if you'd never watched your podcast and you only ever watch the street epistemology videos, you might not really have a good idea of what your personal positions are, which is a great thing, because
that's the goal.
Yeah, you're getting people to talk about their ideas and not defend what they, even if they, go to the line that they're supposed to go to. Then when they're put on the spot to explain that and they can't, it forces them to confront their own, lack of critical thinking on the particular topic.
So two things. One, Reed Nicewinder is the president of Street Epistemology International, and he gave me the idea. This is his idea that I use all the time. It's just freaking brilliant. At the end of every conversation, I used to ask them, the last question used to be, is there any question I didn't ask you that I should have asked you? Yeah, it's a really good question. But he gave me the idea to ask, this is an even better question. What line do you think I'd be on?
Yeah.
And that's how
people get it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the goal. The ultimate goal is that they say, I don't know. The next best thing is that they say the opposite line that they think you'd be on. That's pretty good.
Job well done.
Yeah, job well done. But it's a kind of test to see if you're effective. But the key is it's more of an intellectual and attitudinal posture, and that is to be genuinely curious about why people believe what they believe. Mm-hmm. And the key there is their epistemology. Like, why do they believe? Does the evidence they have and the reasons they have, have they correctly calibrated the confidence in their beliefs?
Which goes back to the idea that if you, the more confident in a claim you are, then the more likely you are to fall into delusion. So if you have the confidence without the evidence, then you're more likely to fall into the delusion.
Yeah, I'd like to, if I may, I gave a talk when I was on tour in Australia at the Ramsay Center, and I'd like to ask you to post that, please. Peter Boghossian, Ramsay Center, Australia. And for those people who are watching this is a very high level. I got the idea from Jordan Peterson when he told me that.
It's which one more time?
Ramsay Center, Australia, Peter Boghossian. So it's a theoretical talk. Ramsay.
Yep.
Yeah. It answers your question. It's pretty high level, but it answers your question of, how did you come about this? And it's pretty wild. I talk about science fiction. I talk about this being a necessary condition for intelligent life in the universe. It's a kind of a grand unified field theory of things. Thanks for posting. I just
posted that link, guys. Definitely check that out after the stream. Thank you. So I mean, this. It's interesting to see the evolution of different people's beliefs as the landscape has changed by a lot. So what would you say is the biggest change in your thinking, just in general, or an issue that you felt very strongly about one way, and either maybe you're not so sure anymore, or you've completely gone on the other side?
Who, me?
Yes, you.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something totally different. I thought you were gonna say the people you speak to, like, how have their beliefs changed over the years? That's what I thought you were gonna say. So I
don't care about them. I care about you.
Oh, so what's an example of something I've changed my mind on? Is that the question?
Yeah. So if it's maybe just a general line of thinking or a particular issue.
Yeah, a ton of things. So I think it's important when you move in the public space, especially when you move in the specific space that I'm in, you have to model the behavior that you want to see in others. And if I've made a mistake in reasoning, or if I've been catastrophically wrong about something, I think it's really important to say, look, I thought this and it turned out that I was wrong. And yeah, you'll get a bunch of shitheads who will give you grief about it to no end and who'll make fun of you. But that's the thing to do if you have even an iota of integrity. So I'll tell you, the big thing that I was wrong about, even after I looked into it, was the Hunter Biden laptop. So I did believe that it was a Russian disinformation campaign, and I was wrong about that. And I have no, and again, I think it's important to say when you're wrong. So I've changed my mind about other things. I've changed my mind about, some foreign policy issues. I try not to talk about politics too much, particularly because I run a small nonprofit. And at this point, I have so many people who consider me their enemies. They're constantly looking for one small thing I did to.
He said it.
Yeah, like he said it. And the next thing I know, I'm supporting a candidate. I always say every time I talk about someone, like, I'm not supporting this candidate. We're talking about the ideas. I'm not supporting a bill. This is me as a person on your show, but this is what happens in the culture wars, that when someone considers you an enemy at this time, they consider you an existential threat, and they'll do literally anything to get a hold of you. Someone just bombed my assistant's email, and now that we had to just cleanse tens of thousands of. So I don't know. Again, they're not playing by the rules of engagement that people play for in civil societies. Okay, so what have I been wrong about? So I've been wrong about some political things. I prefer not to go into those in depth. I've been wrong about some dietary things as well. I think, this is a great idea of something that.
Dr. Virginia's asking anything that the liberals, woke whatever we're calling that, that they believe that you have, again, even moved from slightly disagree to neutral or the other way around.
Anything that the woke.
And again, if it's more political,
yeah, two things. One was I used to believe, from my conversation with Heather McDonald, who changed my mind on this, and my subsequent conversations with people, I used to believe that one of the reasons that Americans, or I was curious as to one of the reasons why Americans were so willing to throw away the meritocracy. And I used to believe it's because they cultivated an attitude that, because systemic factors were at play, the playing field was intrinsically not level. But after my conversation with Heather McDonald, which you can find online, when I asked her that, she changed my mind and said it's because Americans don't understand the degree of the disparity. And if we only understood the degree of disparity, we wouldn't want to throw away the meritocracy. And then she details that extensively in her book. Her book is excellent. I didn't read chapter 2, but don't tell her that, because it's about classical music, and I don't really like classical music, so I did. But I read the rest of the book. It's excellent. She meticulously documents that. So that would be something.
And I think that that ties.
One more thing. Sorry. The other thing that I've forced myself to reconsider, I'm not saying I'm necessarily wrong about this, was that the figure, and I talked about this in my interview with Helen Joyce, the figure that I've currently seen, that 0.06% of people are trans. I changed my mind about that. I think the whole thing may be a culture bound syndrome, and it may be zero.
Ooh, based. I love that. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed that clip, check out the full live stream link in the bio, and catch me live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern. See you there.